Hello students, in this lecture we will learning about examination of ear. So the points to be covered are: first, parts to be examined while ear examination are pinna, preauricular region, postauricular region, external auditory canal, tympanic membrane, and further we will see about tuning fork tests, CNS examination, which include nystagmus, Romberg test, Unterberger's test, cerebellar test, and fistula test. And we will see about examination of facial nerve, and we will see about tests for eustachian tube patency. First, in ear examination, parts to be examined are preauricular region, pinna, postauricular region, and further go inside external auditory canal, tympanic membrane, and look for tenderness of different region. Examination of ear should be ideally done with bull's eye lamp and head mirror. Bull's eye lamp consists of a metal box with vents within which is kept a 100-watt bulb. The light rays come out through a central opening in the box, and this opening has a biconvex lens of approximately 30 to 40 cm focal length. The lamp is placed 30 cm behind the left ear of the patient. The lamp can be adjusted to focus the rays on the head mirror. This one is head mirror, and head mirror reflects the light from the bull's lamp, and we can focus with bull's lamp and head mirror to see the ear canal of the patient. First, look in preauricular region for cyst, sinuses, scars, lymphadenitis, and skin tags. Preauricular sinus, preauricular skin tags, Darwinian tubercle. This one is poorly formed helix. This one is abnormal ear attachment due to trisomy 17 and 18. This one is malformed ear. In pinna, look for congenital deformities and acquired lesions. Congenital deformities could be anotia or microtia, and acquired lesions could be gouty tophy, carcinoma, and perichondritis. Perichondritis is common acquired lesion of pinna. These different congenital oral anomalies are due to defects of the first pharyngeal arch. This picture shows oral atresia, accessory auricle, preauricular sinus, preauricular tag, and absent external auditory canal. Now postauricular region. In postauricular region, look for scars. Scars could be surgical or non-surgical. Surgical scars are most probably due to post-oral approach in different ear surgeries and tympanoplasty. Look for keloid at postauricular region. Look for edema. Edema at postauricular region is called Griesinger's sign. This sign is seen in lateral sinus thrombophlebitis due to thrombosis of mastoid imagery vein. Look for swelling or fistula in the postauricular region. Look for any palpable lymph node. Lymph nodes are palpated in children most commonly, and palpate the mastoid process. In acute mastoiditis, the periosteum of mastoid process is thickened due to periostitis, which is called ironing of mastoid. These pictures shows acute mastoiditis. When mastoiditis occurs, pus is formed within mastoid antrum which erodes mastoid cortex and it accumulates in subperiosteal space and fluctuant abscess is seen. An edema of periosteum occurs which imparts smooth ironed out appearance in acute mastoiditis, and this pus accumulation which will displace the pinna forward and downward. This is a classic appearance of ironed out appearance in acute mastoiditis. Look for tenderness. Tenderness could be of three types: tragal tenderness, mastoid tenderness, and jugular tenderness. Tenderness at the mastoid process and at the cymba concha signifies mastoiditis. Tenderness at the cymba concha signifies lesion in McEwan's triangle, and this McEwan's triangle are situated just above the mastoid antrum. So tenderness at the cymba concha signifies mastoiditis. Now 3-finger test. In this test, keep one finger at cymba concha, second finger over posterior border of mastoid, and third finger at the mastoid tip. Maximum tenderness under first finger, that means in cymba concha, signifies tenderness over suprameatal triangle, because cymba concha is situated just above the suprameatal triangle, and tenderness at suprameatal triangle imparts some pathology at mastoid antrum. Tenderness of tragus, tragal sign, indicates furunculosis at the anterior wall of external auditory canal, and this can be seen in otitis externa. And tenderness of pinna indicates perichondritis, and tenderness along the course of internal jugular vein in the neck and localized edema over the thrombosing internal jugular vein is seen in lateral sinus thrombophlebitis. Now we will go inside pinna, that is external auditory canal. In this part, look for congestion, edema, fungus, polyp, stenosis, osteoma, exostosis, and inspect postero-superior region for erosion due to cholesteatoma. Now inspecting using otoscope. To understand this procedure, we have to understand the anatomy of external auditory canal. External auditory canal has two parts. Outer 1/3 part is cartilaginous part, that is 8 mm in length. Inner 2/3 part is bony part, that is 16 mm in length. Suppose this one is external auditory canal, this one is outer cartilaginous part. The direction of this part is upward, backward, and medially. And inner 2/3 bony part, direction of this bony part is medially, downward, and forward. So this one is outer part, that is cymba concha, and this one is inner part, tympanic membrane. So for looking tympanic membrane from cymba concha, we have to pull this outer cartilaginous part in this way. So we have to pull this outer cartilaginous part upward, backward, and laterally, or upward, outward, and laterally. This brings two parts of external auditory canal in alignment, and we can see tympanic membrane. So in adult patient, for seeing tympanic membrane, we have to pull pinna upward, backward and laterally. But in children, bony part of external auditory canal is not well developed. So in children, we have to pull pinna downward and backward, and in adult patient, we have to pull pinna upward, backward and laterally, and hold otoscope upside down in this way, and place dorsal side of hand along the person's cheek, and insert speculum slowly and avoid touching the inner section of canal wall, which is sensitive and may cause pain. After external auditory canal, we will proceed further in tympanic membrane. First, we will see about normal appearance of tympanic membrane. Tympanic membrane has two parts, pars tensa and pars flaccida. This one is pars tensa and this upper part is pars flaccida. Pars tensa looks glistening and light grey in color, and it is tense, so it is called pars tensa. Pars flaccida is flaccid and it looks dull red, and cone of light can be seen in antero-inferior quadrant. Pars tensa of tympanic membrane can be divided into four parts by manubrium of Malleus and umbo. From manubrium of Malleus, vertical imaginary line can be drawn in this way, and from umbo of tympanic membrane, horizontal imaginary line can be drawn. These two lines divides tympanic membrane into four quadrants: antero-superior, antero-inferior, postero-superior and postero-inferior. Cone of light, that is light reflex, can be seen in antero-inferior quadrant, and central part of tympanic membrane is concave in appearance, which is called umbo. This one is handle of Malleus, also called manubrium of Malleus. This one is lateral process of Malleus, and in postero-superior quadrant of tympanic membrane, we can see incudo-stapedial joint sometimes, or incus visible through drum, and this one is pars flaccida, and this peripheral part is annulus of tympanic membrane. Now, retraction or secretory otitis media. In secretory otitis media, basically there is some fluid accumulation in middle ear, so tympanic membrane will look dull. So there is dull drum and loss or distortion of light reflex, or sometimes flabby, bluish or thickened drum, and air fluid level can be seen, and or air bubbles can be seen. Handle of Malleus will become foreshortened, and on sigillization there will be decreased mobility in adhesive otitis media. In this video, we can see movement of tympanic membrane on sigillization. Now we will look for perforation of tympanic membrane. In perforation, look for size, type, site and ream of perforation. Middle ear mucosa seen through perforation or structures visible through perforation, ossicles seen through perforation, Eustachian tube opening, round and oval window, an attic region, and retraction pocket. So first look for size of perforation. That means perforation involves which quadrant or how many quadrant. This is called size of perforation. Moderate, large, subtotal, total, and look for site of perforation, whether perforation involves all quadrant or 2 or 3 quadrant, means which quadrant involves pars tensa or pars flaccida, and see the type of perforation, whether it is central, marginal, subtotal, total, or attic perforation. Look for rim of perforation. Rim is thin or thick, red, pink or white, congested and fibrosed, edematous or not, and tympanosclerotic plaque present or not. These are different figures of different type of perforation in tympanic membrane. This one is central perforation involving anterosuperior quadrant of tympanic membrane. This one is central perforation of medium size involving 2 quadrant of pars tensa, that is antero-inferior and posterior-inferior. This one is subtotal perforation involving all 4 quadrant of pars tensa, antero-superior, antero-inferior, posterior-inferior and posterior-superior, but annulus of tympanic membrane is preserved here, so it is called subtotal perforation. In this type of perforation, all 4 quadrants of tympanic membrane are involved, that is antero-superior, antero-inferior, posterior-superior and posterior-inferior, but along with that there is destruction of fibrous annulus, so it is called total perforation. And in posterior-superior quadrant we can see incudostapedial joint. This one is attic perforation, and this one is marginal perforation involving posterior-superior quadrant of tympanic membrane. These 2 type of perforation, that is marginal perforation and attic perforation, are seen in attico-antral variety of chronic suppurative otitis media, and all other perforation, that is central perforation involving pars tensa, are seen in chronic suppurative otitis media tubotympanic type. Now look for structure visualized through perforation, that is middle ear mucosa seen through perforation. Middle ear mucosa seen through perforation, whether it is pale pink, pink, red or angry red, congested or not. This one is pale middle ear mucosa. This one is pink or red middle ear mucosa. Look for granulation, polypoidal tissue, granular polypoidal or not. Look for secretion or discharge, if any. If secretion or discharge is present, look for type, that is serous, mucoid or purulent discharge. Look for ossicles seen through the perforation, that is malleus and incudostapedial joint. In this type of large perforation we can see malleus. This one is handle of malleus and this one is incudostapedial joint. This one is hypotympanic air cells seen through perforation. Look for eustachian tube opening seen or not. If eustachian tube opening seen, look for discharge present at that site or not. If whether inflamed mucosa present or not. Look for round and oval window, seen or not. Look for attic region, whether congestion, debris or flecks present or not. In this figure, we can see adhesive otitis media, that means tympanic membrane is adhered to medial wall of middle ear, and we can see structures of middle ear through tympanic membrane. This one is stapedial tendon, this one is round window, this one is head of stapes, and this one is facial nerve. Look for retraction pocket. In retraction pocket, look for site that is it involves which quadrant of tympanic membrane. Look for position, at which o'clock, fundus seen or not, flex present within or not, neck wide or not, and self-emptying or not. This picture is of attic retraction. Look for retraction pocket at the attic region of tympanic membrane. Now, tympanosclerosis. Tympanosclerosis is white plaques, that is chalk patch in the tympanic membrane and surrounding the ossicles. There is a hyaline degeneration which undergoes calcification, appears like flecks of white snow. This is a picture of tympanosclerosis. Tympanosclerosis is a hyaline degeneration which undergoes calcification and appears like patches of white snow. Another one is adhesive otitis media. This is the entire tympanic membrane is thinned out due to degeneration of fibrous layer, and adhesion is formed between tympanic membrane, middle ear and ossicles, resulting in deafness. This picture shows adhesive otitis media, means tympanic membrane becomes thinned out due to degeneration of fibrous layer and adheres to medial wall of middle ear, and which results in deafness. Atelectasis. The entire posterior half of tympanic membrane is plastered over the medial wall of middle ear and wraps the ossicles in the posterior quadrant, that is atelectatic drum. This one is picture of atelectatic drum. In this picture we can see posterior half of drum is plastered over the medial wall of middle ear and wraps the ossicle in posterior quadrant. This one is myringoincudopexy, means tympanic membrane adheres over the incus and stapes. This one is promontory, seen through tympanic membrane, present over medial wall of middle ear, and this one is oval window niche. And in periphery we can see tympanosclerotic, means picture like this, calcification or chalky white patches over tympanic membrane. This one is picture of acute otitis media. This one is picture in acute otitis media, which has 4 stages, that is stages of tubal occlusion, stage of pre-suppuration, stage of suppuration and stage of resolution. This is picture of tympanic membrane in stage of pre-suppuration. In this picture we can see leash of blood vessel in periphery of tympanic membrane, which is called cartwheel appearance of tympanic membrane. Also we can see hyperemia and bulging tympanic membrane. This one is picture of tympanic membrane in secretory otitis media. In this picture we can see air bubbles and air fluid level, which indicates that some fluid collection might be present in middle ear cavity, which appears as air fluid level in tympanic membrane examination, and air bubbles might be seen. These all are pictures of tympanic membrane in chronic suppurative otitis media. This is perforation involving posterior-superior and posterior-inferior quadrant of left tympanic membrane. This one is perforation involving pars tensa, and so this one is picture of tympanic membrane in chronic suppurative otitis media tubotympanic type. This one is perforation involving pars flaccida, and attic cholecystoma is present with retraction of tympanic membrane might be seen. So this is a picture of tympanic membrane appearance in attico-antral type of chronic suppurative otitis media. Now cholecystoma sac. Cholecystoma sac consists of mainly two parts. Matrix. Matrix is made up of keratinizing squamous epithelium. This one is matrix of cholecystoma sac. It is made up of keratinizing squamous epithelium which rests on a thin fibrous stroma. This one is thin fibrous stroma, and another part is central white mass consisting of keratin debris which is produced by the matrix. Now tympanic membrane retraction. There are two classifications of tympanic membrane retraction. One is classification of pars tensa retraction, which is called SEDS classification, and another one is pars flaccida retraction, which is called TOS classification. SEDS classification has 4 grades. Grade 1 is mild retraction and tympanic membrane not touching the long process of incus. Grade 2 is tympanic membrane retracted and touching the long process of incus. Grade 3 is tympanic membrane retracted and touching the promontory. And grade 4, tympanic membrane plastered to promontory. That means tympanic membrane adhered to promontory. In grade 3, movement of tympanic membrane might be there. That means on sigillization, tympanic membrane can move because tympanic membrane is retracted and touching promontory but not adhered to promontory. And in grade 4, tympanic membrane adhered to promontory, it does not move on sigillization. Pars flaccida retraction is called TOS classification. Grade 1 is mild attic retraction, and attic is not in contact with neck of malleus. Grade 2 is attic retraction and attic is in contact with neck of malleus. Grade 3 is limited erosion of outer attic wall, which is called sputum, and grade 4 is severe erosion of outer attic wall. Now we will proceed further with tuning fork test. In previous lecture we have seen about parts of tuning fork. This is tuning fork. It has base or stem, base or foot plate. This one is stem and this one is prongs of tuning fork. tuning fork are of three frequencies, that is 256, 512 and 1024 Hz frequency, but 512 Hz frequency tuning fork is most commonly used frequency tuning fork in ENT procedures. Another tuning fork frequency is 128, which is mainly used in central nervous system examination because it is better feel than it can be heard, and 1024 Hz frequency tuning fork is mainly used to estimate cochlear function, and 512 is most commonly used in ENT procedures. Some tuning fork tests are Rinne test, Weber test, absolute bone conduction test, Swabet's test, Bing test, and Gillies test. First is Rinne test. Principle of Rinne's test is that Rinne's test compares air and bone conduction. Air and bone conduction of the test ear are confirmed. For this we have to understand what is air conduction and what is bone conduction. Air conduction means charged tuning fork is placed around 2 semi at 2 semi distance of tragus of pinna, and sound waves are transmitted through external auditory canal, tympanic membrane, ossicles of middle ear and inner ear. Means sound waves are transmitted through air conduction, and in bone conduction, charged tuning fork, that is stem of tuning fork, is placed on mastoid process and sound waves are directly transmitted through cochlea and inner ear. So in this way bone conduction is tested. There are two methods for performing Rinne test. One method, the tuning fork is struck gently on the elbow, kneecap or a rubber pad in this way, and then the vibrating prongs are held against the ear in line with the external canal at a distance of about 1 inch. This step tests the air conduction of the ear. The foot piece of vibrating tuning fork is then placed over the mastoid to test the bone conduction. The patient is asked to indicate the louder of the two sound, whether air conduction or bone conduction. Thus the test compares air conduction of sound to bone conduction. In normal person or in positive cases, the ear canal sound is better heard than that over the mastoid. That is, air conduction is better than bone conduction. Now another method for performing Rinne test is the foot of the vibrating fork is kept over the mastoid bone or the non-hair bearing skin posterior-superior to the external auditory meatus. When it is no more heard, it is held in front of the ear. If it is still heard, means air conduction is better than bone conduction, that means Rinne positive. If it is not heard, that means bone conduction was better than air conduction, that means Rinne negative. This is better method. This is better method as the ear has the property of adaptation and will not hear the sound if the fork is placed continuously over the mastoid. So in toto, if bone conduction is better than air conduction, it means Rinne test is negative. It is mainly seen in conductive hearing loss, and if air conduction is better than bone conduction, that means it is normal or it can be seen in sensory neural type of hearing loss. This one is picture of performing Rinne test. This one is testing for air conduction. This one is testing for bone conduction. Now Rinne positive means interpretation is that air conduction is better than bone conduction. It can be seen in normal individual. In normal individual, air conduction is 2 times of bone conduction. Rinne negative means bone conduction is better than air conduction. The point at which Rinne turns negative is at air-bone gap of 15 to 20 decibel, means minimum 15 to 20 decibel airborne gap should be there for bone conduction to become greater than air conduction. That means Rinne test to be turned negative. It can be seen in conductive deafness. Another one is reduced Rinne positive. This means air and bone conduction both are reduced, but air conduction is still better than bone conduction. AC greater than BC, though both are reduced. This one is seen in sensory neural deafness. False negative, that means bone conduction falsely better with poor or no response to air conduction. This is because the patient is actually hearing the bone conducted sound across the skull through the normal ear, and masking of the normal ear is done to avoid this false result. This one is seen in severe unilateral sensory neural hearing loss. Rinne equivocal means air conduction is equal to bone conduction, AC is equal to BC. This one is seen in mild conductive deafness. Rinne infinite positive, this means air conduction is only heard and bone conduction is absent. This one is seen severe sensory neural deafness because bone conduction indicates conduction through cochlea, means it can be seen in severe sensory neural deafness. Rinne infinite negative means bone conduction only heard or while untested ear is masked, means it can be seen in severe conductive deafness because air conduction indicates conductive component of the hearing. Correlation of Rinne test result with degree of hearing loss. If we are performing tuning fork test with all 3 frequency, we can judge the degree of hearing loss. If tuning fork test means Rinne test is negative at 256 Hz and positive at 512 and 1024, means that this indicates mild hearing loss, means around 25 to 40 decibel hearing loss. And in routine day-to-day conversation, we can say patient can't hear whisper if tuning fork test is negative at 256 and 512 but positive at 1024, means this indicates moderate hearing loss, means hearing loss of around 40 to 55 decibel, means we can say patient can't hear normal day-to-day conversation. If Rinne test results are negative for all the 3 frequency, we can say this one is severe type of hearing loss, means hearing loss above 55 decibel, and we can say patient can't hear loud noise or shouting, means Rinne test has high specificity but low sensitivity. Now intensities of different type of speech. Whisper has 30 decibel intensity, normal conversation 60 decibel, shouting 90 decibel, discomfort in the ear is at 120 decibel, and at 130 decibel there can be pain in the ear. Now another test is Weber test. In this test, sound is travels directly to the cochlea via bone. Means this test compares bone conduction of both ear simultaneously. Method of performing this test is place the base of vibrating tuning fork in the midline, that is, it can be put at midpoint of forehead or vertex or midpoint of chin or at the incisor teeth. Sound waves travels through the skull and activate the cochlear fluid and cause hearing, and we have to ask patient which side it is heard. In conductive deafness, it is lateralized to deceased ear, and in sensorineural deafness, it is lateralized towards better ear. In patient with conductive deafness, at one ear, ambient noise due to ambient noise are decreased in that ear due to conductive deafness, and sound due to bone conduction are travel more easily in that ear, and sound is heard more loudly in that ear because of air conduction deficiency, or ambient noise can't be there in that ear. And in sensorineural deafness, it is lateralized towards better ear because when we put base of vibrating tuning fork, sounds are transmitted through cochlea, and that ear which has better hearing can hear the sound. But if both ear has conductive deafness, sound is lateralized towards the worst ear, which applies same principle because worst ear has low amount of ambient noise, so it can hear sound through bone conduction betterly. This one is figure of Weber test. This base of tuning fork is placed on the mid part. If normal person, Weber test is equal to both ear, but if there is minimum 3 to 5 decibel airborne, only 3 to 5 decibel gap of hearing between two ear, Weber test can be lateralized. In conductive loss, it is lateralized to same ear, and in sensorineural loss, it is lateralized towards opposite ear. Means in sensorineural hearing loss, the better ear towards better ear sound is lateralized, and in conductive deafness towards the worst ear or deceased ear sound is lateralized. Third one is absolute bone conduction test. Principle of this test is this test compares the duration of bone conduction of patient with duration of bone conduction of the examiner, presuming that examiner has normal hearing. Method of performing this test is ask patient to close his external auditory canal by pressing the tragus and place the vibrating tuning fork at the mastoid process. When patient stops hearing the sound, it is brought at the examiner's mastoid process while keeping the external auditory canal closed by pressing the tragus by the self finger. This test is based on the presumption that examiner's hearing is normal. If ABC reduced, it indicates sensorineural deafness, Because we are closing tragus, we are stopping air conduction to transmit, and we are checking for only bone conduction. If ABC reduced, that means bone conduction is reduced, and it can be seen in sensory neural deafness. If ABC not reduced, it can be seen in normal ear, means duration are equal to examiner, and in conductive deafness, because in conductive deafness bone conduction is normal and air conduction is decreased, and this test compares only bone conduction, so this is called absolute bone conduction test. This is a picture of performing absolute bone conduction test. This is how tragus is closed and stem of tuning fork is placed on the mastoid process. Another one is Swabat's test. This test is somewhat like absolute bone conduction test, but difference is that in this tuning fork test, bone conduction of patient is compared with that of the normal hearing examiner, but external auditory canal is not occluded, which was occluded in absolute bone conduction test. So in comparison to examiner, patient's duration of hearing is reduced in sensory neural hearing loss and increased in conductive hearing loss. In conductive hearing loss, patient has already decreased air conduction. That means outer ambient noise will not disturb bone conduction hearing. So this air conduction part is already decreased, so patient can hear the sound better than examiner, means duration is increased in conductive hearing loss, and in sensory neural hearing loss sound is transmitted through cochlea, so in sensory neural hearing loss duration is reduced than examiner. Another test is Bing test. Bing test examines the effect of occlusion of ear canal on the bone conduction hearing. The base of a charged tuning fork is kept on the mastoid while the examiner alternately closes and opens the EAC by pressing on the tragus. In case of normal hearing and sensory neural hearing loss, patients hear louder when EAC is occluded and softer when the EAC is open. When EAC is open, there is some amount of air conduction, means ambient noise is there. So patients of normal hearing and SNHL will hear softer, but when we occlude EAC, there is no air conduction, means no ambient noise, and patient of normal hearing and SNHL will hear louder. That means it is Bing positive. That means change of quality of sound to louder and softer. But in Bing negative, in case of conductive hearing loss, patient will appreciate no change in hearing because patient has already conductive hearing loss and no conduction occurs through air pathway, so there is no ambient sound, and while we close or open, patient has no change in sound quality, and patient will appreciate no change in hearing. Another one is Gillies test. Gillies test examines the effect of increased air pressure in ear canal on the bone conduction hearing. The tuning fork is placed on the mastoid. The air pressure is increased in the EAC by Siegel's speculum, which pushes the ossicles inward and raises the middle ear pressure. That results in decreased hearing. means Gill is positive due to immobility of basilar membrane. Increased pressure through Seagal's speculum, which pushes ossicles inward, and ossicles are connected through oval window to inner ear, which causes basilar membrane to immobile, and which results in decreased hearing due to immobility of basilar membrane. That means all units from external to inner ear are connected, and when we increase pressure in external ear, inner ear also is affected. And now if there is no change in hearing when ossicular chain is fixed, means some component of transmission of sound is affected, Gillies test becomes negative. When there is ossicular chain fixation in otosclerosis, tympanosclerosis, or if ossicular chain is disconnected due to trauma, when we increase pressure in external auditory canal, pressure is not transmitted through middle ear to inner ear, and there is no change in hearing because basilar membrane is still mobile and patient can hear bone conduction sound. So positive Gillies test means normal hearing and sensory neural hearing loss, and negative Gillies test means there is some defect in air conduction of the sound. So it is a good test when the facility of impedance audiometry is not available. Now we will move further with CNS examination. CNS examination include nystagmus, Romberg's test, Unterberger's test, cerebellar test, and fistula test. First is nystagmus. Nystagmus. First is definition of the nystagmus. Nystagmus is a disturbance of ocular posture which is characterized by more or less rhythmical oscillatory movement of the eyes. It is the term applied to a disturbance of ocular movement characterized by involuntary, conjugate, and often rhythmical oscillations of the eyes. Method to examine for nystagmus. The patient is placed in good light and the examiner faces the patient. The patient's head is kept steady and he is asked to follow the fingertip of the examiner. The examiner's finger is then kept at a distance more than the focal length of the patient at approximately 45 cm. Distance less than the focal length leads to convergence of the eyeball. The finger is then moved 30 degrees laterally. Movement outside this field leads to physiological nystagmus caused by fatigue of ocular muscles. Nystagmus is tested by asking the patient to look at the three finger positions, that is center, left lateral and right lateral. Observe the rate, amplitude and rhythm in each direction and whether or not nystagmus is sustained. The direction of fast component is direction of the nystagmus. An abolishment of nystagmus occurs by in labyrinthine destructive lesions. Now, difference between labyrinthine nystagmus and central nystagmus. Labyrinthine nystagmus is unidirectional, means it occurs in one direction only, and central nystagmus is bidirectional. Labyrinthine nystagmus is associated with vertigo. The vertigo is always rotational either surrounding or the patient appears to move, means patient gives history of surrounding moving sensation or self-moving sensation, but in central nystagmus is not associated with vertigo, means no history of vertigo. Vertigo, if present, is like spinning movement in the head. Labyrinthine nystagmus not very long lasting. Central nystagmus is long lasting. Labyrinthine nystagmus is horizontal. Central nystagmus is horizontal, vertical or oblique. Labyrinthine nystagmus is fine, while central nystagmus is coarse, sluggish or violent jerk in cerebellar type. Labyrinthine nystagmus has lesion in semicircular canal, means in inner ear, in labyrinthine part, and central nystagmus have involvement of central connections of the vestibular nerve. Nystagmus increases on visual fixation, that is eye closure, Frenzel glasses or darkness, while in this nystagmus decreases on visual fixation. In labyrinthine nystagmus, it increases in the direction of fast phases, but central nystagmus does not vary on gaze or eye movements. Labyrinthine nystagmus, in that falling and past pointing are present with third degree nystagmus, and in central nystagmus, falling and past pointing are often present but do not follow the rules of direction. So here we have to understand first the degree of nystagmus. Nystagmus has 3 degree, means first degree, second degree and third degree nystagmus. First degree nystagmus is present only in the direction of quick component. Second degree nystagmus means in addition to quick component direction, it also present in when patient looks straight forward. And third degree nystagmus means in addition to above two, that means quick component and straight, it also present in the direction of slow component. Also, to understand the fast component and slow component, we have to understand the mechanism of nystagmus. So in labyrinthine type of nystagmus, what actually happens is labyrinth will push the eyeball to the opposite side due to its tonic activity. So the right labyrinth will push the eyeball towards the left, and left labyrinth will push the eyeball towards the right. So it cancels each other's activity and eyeball remains in the midline. While in abnormal state, when one labyrinth is getting stimulated either by caloric or positional stimulus, it will push the eyeballs slowly towards the opposite side, and this consists of slow component of nystagmus, but this movement towards opposite side slowly will identified by our cerebral cortex, and it will corrects the slow component by moving the eyeball fastly in mid part, and this consists of fast component of nystagmus. So when labyrinthine gets stimulated, the slow component will be seen in opposite side, that means the normal side, and fast component will be seen on the affected side. But when one labyrinth is dead, the eyeball will be deviated toward the dead labyrinth by the opposite labyrinth. That means opposite labyrinth gets stimulated and it will push the eyeball towards the dead labyrinth. That means slow component is seen towards the affected ear, and cerebral cortex will push the eyeball in midway, means fast component is seen towards the opposite ear. Fast component is seen towards the unaffected side. Now positional nystagmus with vertigo and without vertigo. In positional nystagmus with vertigo, nystagmus produced when head placed backward and to one side, and positional nystagmus without vertigo, nystagmus produced when head placed in any position, and positional nystagmus with vertigo is in that latent period is present, and without vertigo there is no latent period, means sudden nystagmus happens, and with vertigo giddiness is present, and without vertigo giddiness absent. Positional nystagmus with vertigo is fatigable, and without vertigo is unfatigable. Now Romberg's test. It is falling test and is done in vestibular and proprioceptive disorder, and method of performing this test is patient is asked to stand with feet together and arms by the side like this way, and patient is asked to close his or her eye. If patient is asked first to open the eyes, and then he is asked to close the eyes. Another one is sharpened Romberg test. In this test, patient stands with one heel in front of toes and arms folded across the chest. Result of this test: if patient falls down, means Romberg test is positive. If patient falls, there means lesion. If patient falls towards the side of lesion, it means lesion is in labyrinthine part. Means in labyrinthine part, patient falls towards the side of lesion, and in central part, patient falls away from the side of lesion, and tendency to fall towards the side of slow component in labyrinthine lesion, and tendency to fall towards the side of fast component in central lesion. This is the picture of performing Romberg's test. Another one is Unterberger test. With the arms outstretched and the eyes closed, the patient marches on the spot 50 times. Means patient is asked to walk on the spot with outstretched arm and eyes closed. If the patient rotates to one side, they may have labyrinthine lesion on that side. Another one is cerebellar test. Means gaze evoked, rebound, and abnormal optokinetic type nystagmus are present in cerebellar lesion. Depending on the site of lesion, cerebellar disorder can have following features. Cerebellar lesion can be in two parts, cerebellar hemisphere and vermis. Cerebellar hemisphere. If cerebellar hemisphere has four types of phenomena: asynergia, dysmetria, adiadochokinesia, and rebound phenomenon. In asynergia, finger nose test becomes abnormal means in close eye. If we ask patient to touch his tip of nose with outstretched hand finger, he cannot touch his tip of nose, means past pointing may be seen. Dysmetria means patient is not able to control range of motion. Adiadochokinesia means inability to perform rapid pronation and supination like this. Rebound phenomenon means if patient is not able to control movement when opposing force is suddenly withdrawn. If lesion is present in vermis, this gait of the patient is wide base gait and inability to make sudden turns on walking, and falls means patient falls down and truncal ataxia can be seen. Fistula test. This is the test performed to detect a fistula in the vestibule of inner ear. Principle of this test is erosion of the bony part of the vestibule, usually the lateral semicircular canal, either by ear disease or trauma, exposes the membranous labyrinth to external pressure changes. If the labyrinth is functioning, the pressure changes will lead to its stimulation and causes a subjective feeling of vertigo, vomiting, and associated nystagmus. In the test, external pressure changes are achieved by various methods, and erosion or fistula is demonstrated by subjective feeling of vertigo, vomiting, and nystagmus. The external pressure can be altered by alternatively compressing and releasing the tragus against the external meatus and altering the pressure in the ear canal and stimulating the labyrinth. By using a Seagal's speculum to increase and decrease the pressure in the ear canal, using the probe of an impedance audiometer to cause pressure changes, by moving granulation or polyp in the ear by a cotton tipped applicator. Now fistula test results. If fistula test When fistula test is positive, means there is subjective feeling of giddiness, nausea, vomiting with or without nystagmus. It is seen in which condition labyrinth is functioning and erosion is present. Fistula test is positive means when external ear pressure is increased, pressure is transmitted to inner ear, and means labyrinth is functioning, so there is nystagmus or subjective feeling of vertigo, and means pressure is transmitted in inner ear, means there is erosion or fistula. Another condition, false positive fistula test, is means subjective feeling of giddiness with no fistula in the labyrinth. It is seen in congenital syphilis due to hypermobile stapes foot plate, which is called Henneberg sign, also seen after stapedectomy. False negative fistula test means negative fistula test with the presence of a fistula in the labyrinth, means fistula is present but fistula test is negative. It can happen in while labyrinth becomes dead. So it is seen in dead labyrinth when labyrinth does not react to any stimuli. So pressure is transmitted to inner ear, but inner ear labyrinth is dead. So nystagmus or subjective feeling of giddiness doesn't occur. This is method of doing fistula test. Now, site of fistula and type of nystagmus. There are different site of fistula according to their site. Different type of nystagmus occurs. If fistula is present in lateral semicircular canal, nystagmus is seen towards the normal side. If fistula is anterior to the ampulla of lateral semicircular canal, then nystagmus is towards the affected side. If fistula is seen in posterior canal, nystagmus is in a vertical direction. If fistula is present in vestibule, there are rotatory horizontal nystagmus towards the abnormal ear. If fistula is present in superior semicircular canal, rotatory nystagmus towards the normal ear. Now we will proceeding further with examination of facial nerve. First is on gross examination. On gross examination, look for whether facial asymmetry present or not, whether one half or both halves of face are affected or not, whether upper motor neuron or lower motor neuron facial palsy, means same or opposite half of face affected. In upper motor neuron palsy, forehead muscles of upper half of face are spared due to bilateral neuron supply from bilateral nerve supply of upper half of face, and only opposite side lower half of face is affected. But in lower motor neuron, same side whole upper and lower half of face is affected. So look for same or opposite half of face affected and forehead spared or not. On passive movement, look for inability to close the eyes, means orbicularis oculi muscle affected, absence of wrinkling of forehead, means frontal belly of occipitofrontalis muscle is affected, loss of nasolabial fold and inability to blow cheek on one side, means buccinator muscle affected. Loss of nasolabial fold means orbicularis oris, levator labii superioris, levator anguli oris muscle might be affected. On active movement, passive movements are tested with resistance to particular action. Look for any associated movements, that means synkinesis, facial twitching, hemifacial spasm, blepharospasm. Look for scars of any previous surgery, means ear surgery, post-oral or end-oral scar. If patient has history of ear surgery, there might be post-oral or end-oral scar, and look for parotidectomy scar. This is a picture of facial palsy. Look for absence of forehead crease, deviation of angle of mouth, loss of nasolabial fold. Test for facial nerve function. Three types of tests are there: Schirmer, lacrimation flow assessment, stapedial reflex, and electrodiagnostic tests. In Schirmer's test or lacrimation flow assessment is topognostic test done at bedside. In this test, a small filter paper is placed on both the lower conjunctival fornices for 5 minutes and the amount of lacrimation is compared from side to side. In this way, this is a small filter paper placed in both conjunctival fornices, and for 5 minutes a reduction of lacrimation to 30% or less compared with total lacrimation of both eyes, or bilateral reduction to 25 mm is considered significant. It can be used as a potential for exposure keratitis, and reduction of lacrimation occurs when lesion is at point of origin of greater superficial petrosal nerve. Greater superficial petrosal nerve is a branch of facial nerve, gets origin from first genu of facial nerve and supplies lacrimal gland. So when lesion is proximal to this point, this branch of nerve get affected and lacrimation is decreased. Stapedial reflex. Contraction of stapedius muscles occurs on presenting loud sounds to the ear as a protective mechanism. Facial nerve has branch of nerve to stapedius which gets originated from second genu, and this stapedial reflex occurs only if the nerve to stapedius is functioning. Means branch nerve to stapedius is a branch of intact facial nerve. Electrodiagnostic tests, which include electroneuropathy and electromyography. Now tests for eustachian tube patency. This include Valsalva's maneuver, Politzerization, eustachian catheterization, Siegeleization, Toynbee's maneuver, Frenzel maneuver, sonotubometry, and impedance audiometry. First is Valsalva's maneuver. Now how it can be done? Ask patient to close to both nostrils, means pinch his nostril and blow with mouth like this way. If he does this, if patient has patent eustachian tube, air pressure increase in the nasopharynx and it is transmitted in middle ear via eustachian tube, and the air reaches the middle ear through patent eustachian tube. Uses of Valsalva's maneuver. It is used in retracted eardrum or secretory otitis media. When patient has retracted eardrum, by this maneuver air can be pushed in middle ear, and when patient has fluid accumulation in middle ear like in secretory otitis media, this maneuver can be of much helpful. Another use is in aero otitis media and in Caterhall otitis media, means CSOM and acute otitis media. Disadvantage: it can be performed only in expiratory phase of respiration, and if patient has very thin drum or healed drum, the tympanic membrane might get ruptured while doing this test, because pressure built up in the middle ear is very high. In politzerization, pressure is transmitted to the middle ear via nasopharynx with the help of Politzer bag, and the tip of Politzer bag is administered in nasal cavity and pressure is increased, and bulging of tympanic membrane is seen as air gushes in. Same way in eustachian catheterization, catheter is passed in nasal cavity under local anesthesia to the eustachian tube, and Sound is auscultated in via external auditory meatus. If there is hollow sound, means there is normal function of eustachian tube. If there is wheeze, means narrow lumen stricture. If there is bubbling or crepitation, means there is otitis media with middle ear effusion. Uses of eustachian catheterization are first to test the patency of the tube, another one to diagnose partial or complete obstruction of the tube, another one to dilate tubal stricture with Bookies. Sigillization, we will see further. Toynbee maneuver. In Toynbee maneuver is somewhat same like Valsalva's maneuver. In this maneuver, with nose pinch with nostril pinching, patient is asked to swallow. If he swallows and eustachian tube is patent, middle ear pressure increased in both ears. Another test for eustachian tube patency are Frenzel maneuver, sonotubometry, and impedance audiometry. Sigillization. The Seagal's speculum consists of an oral speculum of various size with a 10 diopter lens. This one is figure of Seagal's speculum. It consists of an oral speculum. This one is oral speculum with a 10 diopter lens. The speculum is connected to a side tube which is attached to a rubber bulb. This is side tube and this is rubber bulb to increase pressure in external auditory canal. The rubber bulb can be pressed and released to alter pressure in the ear canal. The speculum should be snugly fit into the ear canal to make system airtight. The pathology of the ear is examined by fitting the speculum in the ear canal and pressing the rubber bulb. We can also see movement of the tympanic membrane by this test. Functions of Seagal's speculum. It gives a magnified view of tympanic membrane to give a magnified view of the pathology, that is perforation, to access mobility of the tympanic membrane. If tympanic membrane is adhered to the medial wall of middle ear, like in adhesive otitis media, it will not move. But if there is grade 3 retraction of pars tensa, mobility might be present. To elicit fistula sign by causing alteration in the ear canal pressure. To instill medication or suck out discharge from the middle ear by varying pressure in the ear canal. Thank you for listening. Keep learning and keep smiling. Thank you.